Seek him out. And when you find him, please, I would love to eat his cookies with some fava beans and a nice chilled Fresca.
Oh my word, this is so scary, Chris. We're in a very undisclosed area.
Hush.
Deep in the woods. We actually really are. Not that it means anything to the viewers, but here we are. Another episode of Way Too Spooky November. You idiots out there thought we were just going to be done after Halloween. No, we're not. There's just too much to talk about. So.
There's too much spookiness in this world.
Yeah, and we decided to go a different route this November. This is we wanted to talk about an all-time classic here, but we had to wait for our resident house, our friend who really, really understands this movie outside you and I.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, you know what? He surprised me. He surprised us one year because he really got into the whole series, which is something I've never done. But we're joined with our friend Dan. Hi, Dan.
Hi guys.
Yeah.
This is fun.
This is a lot of fun, but this actually is a very classic movie. 1991.
Yes.
Is when it came out.
Yep.
Silence of the Lambs.
Spooky movie.
Yeah, well, of course we'll get to the rating.
Yeah.
At the very end, but
I'm not giving away my rating.
No,
yet,
but Dan, seriously, we did actually wait for you because I think it was a few years ago you just kind of burned through the whole series by yourself.
I don't remember a lot of it, but I did.
Yeah.
But it took, we've been talking about this for quite a while now, and it just took a weekend literally deep in the woods camping for me to have the time to watch this movie again. So,
well, let's take real
but
quick.
It came out of nowhere, though. You just randomly decided that you were going to watch this movie.
I forget when it was, but it may have been when I took behavioral science in 12th grade. And Mr. Aceto would have a lot of he would talk a lot about serial killers.
Yeah.
And the concept behind it kind of always fascinated me from the start. So then I forget if we watched this movie in school or maybe he recommended it and I watched it out of school.
He was wild.
But just the whole like psychology behind like someone that's kind of I guess geared towards doing things like that is kind of always been fascinating because they're obviously so there's problems.
Well,
so.
True crime like podcasts outside this like serial killers is actually like they always rank highest of most viewed. I think for that it's usually suburban moms and you. That's literally the only two demographics who love this stuff. But because I know you're not traditionally like a big horror fan, but I do notice you like shit like this.
Because it's
good.
These things have happened and do happen. So they're for me, you kind of think about the fact that this kind of happens and is out there. So
there's bad people everywhere.
Yeah.
But then there's really bad people out there, and these are the bad.
These are like
people.
The planners.
Yeah.
There's psychopaths who lose their shit, or you could even road rage. Like a sane person can lose their fucking shit in a moment.
Yeah.
But then there's people who like manipulate and plan.
Yeah.
And that's what this was. So this was always a movie that I've always known about. It's funny you talk about the horror genre. Like I used to always see that mask, Hannibal Lecter's mask.
Right. Oh, it's unsettling.
And when he's being transported, I haven't seen it in years. I don't know if it's maybe faded as far as the horror genre, but I always thought this was one of those movies that, like to your point, Dan, it falls into like a thriller aspect, like a mind bender.
Well, what this movie does for me is a lot what Halloween does for me. It leaves, at least the Halloween one, it leaves a lot of interpretation up to the viewer. You don't see a lot of violence in this movie. It's not a super violent movie. However,
it has scenes.
You have scenes, and
violent.
you have to be smart enough as the viewer to think through what it is this person could do. And there's not only one killer, there's two. There's Hannibal Lecter, and then there's Buffalo Bill. You know what I mean? It's very unsettling in that sense because you think about what could these people do to someone? Why would they do that to someone? It's the who, what, why, when, and where of these people. Why are they like this?
Also, it was nice to actually watch a movie like this because you told me this movie was very well done. It grossed a ton of money. Not that means everything, but the reason why it did is because it was a well-written story. It's not like we're just going back to like a slasher film for mindless entertainment. This was like from the get-go. It had a good vibe to it. Who was obviously the lead cast in
Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
I always confuse her with Helen Hunt. I almost said Helen Hunt. No, Jodie Foster.
It came from the same era.
It was FBI. Off the bat, it was just very intense, the movie. Mm-hmm. A psychological thriller. I gotta say, watching this again now, when you see like all the like every dude in this movie was just creepy. Like, did they purposely do that? Like everybody. Clearly, the guy who ran the psych ward was a creep. But even like her higher up in the FBI, I think it was the way they did the camera work, and like every dude they casted in this movie was fucking ugly and strange looking. I don't know why.
Well, there's really no women in the movie aside from the victims and Clarice, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they're all
Clarice.
It's a predominantly male cast, and shows you, I guess, the time frame, the 90s, where it's in the FBI there really were
only
that
many agents that
males,
were,
I guess, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's real or not, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
But it's certainly an unsettling movie, that's for sure.
You did make a connection because she had to visit the psych ward. Like, this movie gets right into it, where she gets assigned this to meet with Hannibal Lecter. She has not even graduated from the academy. She's like a week out. And she has like her background, like psychology degree, everything you wanted to talk to him. But the whole point was an angle because Hannibal Lecter apparently would give some good insight on the killer in the movie, who was Buffalo Bill. That was the whole point.
Right.
So they didn't quite tell her that, but I think that's the reason why they went this angle, because she was smarter than most of the other FBI agents.
I think she thinks like a serial killer does.
Well, I think they also felt, what they had done was they were banging their head against the wall and nothing was working. So she was kind of a different, fresh angle that they could try to hopefully get information that they were just wildly unsuccessful in attaining. So,
well, the one thing that I forget about is whether we had watched the movie long ago, was Manhunter, which is the prequel to this, like essentially Red Dragon, right? And
have not watched, by the way.
Oh, it's great. But I forget the name of the guy, but he's the head guy from NCIS, I want to say it is.
Yeah, like season 26 or something.
Something like that. Yeah. William Patterson, I think his name is. Anyways, he's supposed to be. I guess he's the lead guy in that, right? But Anthony Hopkins is also, I think, part of Red Dragon. But what type of victim was? What did Anthony Hopkins go after? What were his types of victims? Did they ever...
Well, he was a therapist,
right?
So I think he went after. I don't think it was like cliche. Like, he didn't go after just women. I think he went after somebody who failed. Because remember, there was that scene I totally forgot about. Showed up 3 times, stopped coming. Like, I think he went after the people who weren't trying to improve their well-being. Like, he's actually a good therapist if you think about it.
It's almost like he was insulted.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what the fuck am I not giving you?
You have no hope, so I'm just gonna.
I'm gonna kill you.
You have no value.
And that was his angle.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you have no hope. So he was really just weeding out the people he's
It's
paying.
reasonable. Yeah.
Well, hey, is it better for just keep going therapist, knowing that like you're just gonna keep taking the money and you're not gonna help these people? He was an honest guy.
Well, he kind of
maybe he wasn't the villain.
I don't remember the quote or the scene exactly, like word for word, but I think it's towards the end. He has no. While you still feel unsettled, he has no intentions of hurting Jodie Foster's character. Clarice.
No, but
he actually respects her.
He respects her because I remember as soon as she showed up to which you actually made a funny point about this, Dan. I love how they were going over the brief precautions when you see
which
him,
were just so
as
extreme.
they're walking.
Yeah,
I was like, no, this is kind of a big deal because he's killed people who've come close to his glass cage.
Yeah,
he's very tactical.
They seem like extremely,
cautious.
Yeah, very cautious, very, very important, and it's like obviously there wasn't time to sit down and talk about this, so let's just say it in passing on our way into.
And she was honest with him because he started to ask personal questions. What they told her, don't tell me anything about your childhood or personal matters. But I think as a therapist, that's all he wanted to hear was somebody just being bluntly honest with them.
And I think he tested her too. I don't remember the exact what he said, but I think he tested her in ways that he knew the answer and was looking to see if she'd be honest, and she was. I can't remember the exact
the entire movie
dialogue.
Yeah, the whole movie. That's the only way he was going to help her.
She was always real. He always asked her a few times, and be honest with me, and he wants the honest answer. She's as real as he needs. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if you're not real, if you're telling any slight fib, and he knows and he can sense it because he's very brilliant. Mm-hmm. You have no value to him.
Hey, outside of all this, I gotta say, there's some great performances over the years from great actors, but he fucking nailed this.
Yeah,
Anthony Hopkins is a great actor.
I think they all did. It's not just Anthony Hopkins. That's why this movie is so good.
That is his most iconic role. He's been in so many movies.
It's so mysterious.
But if you saw him, I think you just think of Hello, Clarice. You
Yeah,
just
it's
think
a
of
slow
Hannibal
burn.
Lecter.
It's an anticipation. It's what's going to happen.
Music was done well.
Yeah, but you know what I like most about this podcast is that the wine that we're drinking right now.
Oh, it's a nice red.
Red-
We'll call it a Chianti.
We're gonna call it a Chianti.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. We actually are deep in the woods in Pennsylvania. And actually, what seemed like that time of year when this movie was shot. It's
right.
fall. But we're actually having some liver and what was it, fiber beans?
Fava
beans,
Fava
yeah,
beans,
yeah.
With a nice Chianti for dinner.
That's Chianti.
Over the campfire. Sure.
Right.
I have to do it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
It's hard to do.
I can't do that.
I
thing.
tried. It's bad.
I remember
It's hard.
Jim Carrey tried to do it in Dumb and Dumber. Remember?
Yeah.
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 It's not good. Even Jim Carrey can't do it.
No.
But-
Hey, and there were some shocking lines in this movie. Remember that weird cellmate was kind of like, "I can smell your see you next Tuesday."
That's right.
I was kind of like, yeah, and then like it had some good one-liners in there.
There's some evil people in this world. You know, it's and they do a good job of, I think, illustrating that in this movie, showing you that there's bad and there's far worse, and it's just this.
So the real killer in this movie actually wasn't even Anthony Hopkins. It was Buffalo Bill.
That's the focus. Yeah, Buffalo
Yeah.
Bill.
Dude, I forget who played this character.
Ted Levine. He's
Yeah.
also Rusty Nails and Joyride.
That's right. You told me that.
Candy cane.
Candy Cane. What do you mean? So like that's the voice who did him.
That's right. I don't think he's uncredited, but he does that. He's got a very
He's got a deep voice.
distinct voice. It's very like
So he's a dude. He's got a deep voice, and the whole backstory to him is that like he skins these women, but he's looking to make a skin suit. He wants to like become a woman, is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's so unhappy with his own life that he thinks, I guess, that'll take him to
where he needs to be,
another level. It's so far away from people, I suppose.
and hence the moth aspect, where he would leave like some kind of weird transformative moth in these victims' mouths.
Right.
Because like that's the whole point of like a butterfly or something. They're supposed to
So
go-
we have a question real quick for the host or the guest, Dan. If you had to wear one form of skin from a human body, what would you wear to stay warm?
You didn't tell me about this question, Dan.
One
You
form of
don't have to
skin
ask
for
the
the
answer
human
to this.
body.
Do you want to do like the?
I just don't even know how to interpret that, to be
skull?
honest.
Do you wanna do the,
like the part of the body? Yeah, that's a
You gotta
tough
go
one.
with the face.
I think that's one you really have to think about before you answer. You know, so kind of springing that in is.
Yeah, you don't have to answer it during this
Yeah,
podcast.
maybe when we come back for a revisit.
when we come back for the Hannibal sequel, you can
Yeah,
answer it.
there
okay?
we go. That'll be
I'd
more
wear
appropriate.
somebody, I don't know, like a bigger dick. I'd probably do that. That'd be funny. Just a slap on down there. That's not mine. Because you mentioned that because, you know, I'm not trying to jump ahead here, but there was a couple twists in there that I actually forgot about in this movie.
Yeah.
So him and Clarice come to this agreement. He wanted to sell with a view.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted certain things that he knew he would never get, and she overcompensated and got him like a better deal
Right.
of what he wanted to do.
And
So-
she lied to him too.
she lied to him. But he ends up in between that facility is when Anthony Hopkins actually skins that dude, right? Do you remember at the hotel?
He does. Yeah.
And he put his face on.
right.
So I don't know. I think that's been done before, either Leatherface. But that was something, if you haven't seen the movie or in years, you actually forget about that turn. That
Well, that's probably
he-
the best part of the movie is that
it
you
was.
think that collectively the team, not Jodie Foster, but her superior, I forget the name of him, plus the entire FBI has found, quote unquote, Buffalo Bill, right? And that's what I like is that it's a big red herring where you think they're coming upon, and this is far ahead in the movie, but they're coming along to his house and they truly aren't there. They're not at the right place, but she
No.
is because she continued to follow up.
She followed her
continued to take
instincts,
the
her
a
leads.
last lead and doesn't take everything as she takes everything with a grain of salt. And,
Yeah.
and that's what I love about this character is
She was asking questions about him the way he opened the door.
yeah.
Yeah,
They
And he was
really-
like- that's when he's like, "Oh, wait, was she like a big old like fat woman or something like that?" Was it- oh, did you ever kiss that guy? I was his character was so fucking well done.
So you're not a big horror movie fan. So what is it about this movie that really would you say?
You know, you guys know this about me, but I like you know, more nonfiction type things. I like things that I can really think when I'm watching it that, you know, this either has happened or does happen or
But why do you
could
like Harry
happen.
Potter so much?
That's not. I've never seen any of those movies. No offense to those who like them, but you know, that's just so. So with these kind of movies, it's fascinating because obviously, you know, and as Connor mentioned, there's in this day and age, there's a lot out there in terms of serial killers, but this was kind of like, you know, maybe it wasn't the first, but it was before its time, and painting that picture of these types of people. So I don't know. I like this because it is less, you know, horror and fantasy per se, and it is, you know, these kinds of things have happened, so it fascinates me.
Yeah.
It is, and from beginning to end, there's not many movies that can do that. But like, I was in, and I've seen this years ago, but I'm like, we were campfire watching this last night.
Yeah, that was
Clamping.
cool.
Out in rural Pennsylvania.
Clamping. Yeah, we literally are in the middle of the woods, and we're watching a
I'm
movie
with
on
like
TV.
two
God.
big campers here, but like,
God for technology.
Dan, you've actually gone to the point where you actually kind of are a glamper.
I wouldn't say that.
You're a glorified camper.
Yeah. We'll say I'm in the middle.
I basically shared a Hilton with you last night, and I was like, that was one of the best sleep I've gotten in a long time. Probably because my 6 and 4-year-old didn't come bursting into my room at 6
It definitely
in the morning.
helps.
But
Well,
yeah.
what was nice is last night as I was sleeping, as I was able to sleep, you know, in my own air mattress and just gaze over to you two sleeping in the same air mattress and what your face would look like on my face.
Yeah, I actually slept great because I just drank a ton of booze and there's no children, and I watched a Hannibal Lecter movie and I just slept.
But
like
we
an
also we kept it light too. We watched Family Matters with Steve Urkel,
Yeah.
which was good.
Yeah.
It's a good balance. Yeah.
Well, anyway, this always happens. We get off hand and we start talking about Family Matters. Every podcast this happens.
But I just love the mother Harriet. Harriet is such a good mother.
She is.
Yeah.
Hannibal Lecter would have not been a good dad. Bad dad. Buffalo Bill was the actual villain in the movie besides Hannibal Lecter, but the main focus was Buffalo Bill. They needed to find him. Her character, Jodie Foster, did great. She followed on that last lead. Intense is how I would describe the scene when he like shuffles out of like the kitchen. He starts laughing because he knows he's caught, and he like drops the cards because he's looking for that contact. And he just hits the fucking like power went out, and that basement was created for a serial killer. It's like a labyrinth.
Yeah.
There's like multiple rooms, and he had the night vision goggles, and the way that was done, that's heart pounding.
Well,
You know?
I think just again, I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but the build up to all this, but is that they really put you in the mind of that serial killer, and that he's planned this out for years. Not only his victims,
Right.
but also potentially getting caught. Right. So he has this whole elaborate setup where he kind of knows that if that day comes where he gets caught, this is what I do. I
Yeah.
shut the lights off, or I trap
He
him.
knew it was going to happen.
He did.
Yeah.
And you know, it's
The well in his
he's
basement.
terrifying. You know, it rubs the lotion on it.
Yeah, and, like-
the host again. He has this fantasy in his head of
He
how
was looking
things
for the
should
right
go
skin
to
yeah.
create a victim.
But
for
there
himself.
was something that you mentioned. The daughter who was, taken by Buffalo Bill was like the daughter of a senator. It actually played by that woman from The Sopranos, and I didn't realize that until I was watching it.
Dr. Melfi.
They did some kind of mind thing there where they used her name over and over and over again because it made some kind of connection. Buffalo Bill, when he was like lowering the lotion into the basket or the well, he kept saying we referred to her not by her name, and like I think like he gets emotionally attached to Buffalo Bill, hence the dog. So when they captured the dog and like was struggling to breathe, and like he does have emotional bond to certain things. Yeah. So I think this is
not people.
I think if he just treats her as an object was the whole point of Buffalo Bill, and not get emotionally attached to something, he can do what he has to do.
Well, I think that's probably a pretty common theme amongst serial killers. So.
I always thought it was opposite. I thought there's just like Hannibal was a psychopath. They said his heart rate never goes above anything, but this guy I think does care about certain things, but he's
they try not to create an attachment because that would make
Yeah.
it more difficult.
Yeah,
They can view their victims as an object,
and I felt bad for that dog too. Don't get me wrong, but she had to do what
Well,
she had
I
to
was
do.
just amazed that the dog was so well groomed. That dog requires a lot of grooming to look as good as it did, and
put a lot of
I
lotion
wouldn't expect someone of his lifestyle to
what's the
go
dog's name?
make sure it takes the dog to the groomer
Yeah,
every
what
now
was
and then.
The dog's name.
I don't
Fuck,
know.
man.
Doesn't matter. We'll call it Sunshine or something like that. I think it's
Yeah, he
wasn't it
started
like-
losing shit when he had the dog. When she lured the dog down there, but a scene you kept talking about, I actually heard you talking about it in the camp. I think you were just dreaming. You kept talking about the tuck scene. You're like, it's hot, Buffalo Bill. How do I tuck
This is
that?
absolutely not true.
I actually I think that was a pretty provocative moment. Did he actually tuck that himself?
I used to know
it's a
someone that did
mangina.
that.
He does
Yeah,
a mangina.
I've done the tuck move many times in front of you guys. Every dude has fucking tucked it just to like out of
I
curiosity.
wouldn't say every dude.
90% maybe.
But the song, I forget, it was a great song that was played. I'm like, we may have to play that song after this.
I could go for that.
But I used to laugh at this when I was like younger. When I was younger, I should have not seen this movie, but I did. It's kind of like, would you fuck me? Like, I'd fuck me as he's putting.
It's just the lips. All I see is the lips.
Yeah, it's very unsettling. You know what? I also I've also mentioned this before, but it leaves a lot up to the viewer's discretion as to the idea as to what, what's going to happen, what's happening. They never, nothing ever is given away to you unless you've obviously seen the entire movie. But like the well, like, did he dig that well himself, or did he buy the place? It had the well in it, and he said, "This is perfect for what I truly need."
Is what it was.
It's so scary how that's calculated and planned in this movie.
Dude, there are some weird fucking homes out there.
I mean, he must have dug it himself. I don't know that there was
no well water coming out of there for sure.
I don't know enough information about that, but it's his dungeon, his lair that he just
room after room after room.
Yeah, he just his victims are just,
and moths are just flying around the house.
They meet some criteria that they hover on, but they don't necessarily tell you exactly what it is, and that's the fear. It's the fear of the unknown that keeps you hooked to your seat, at the edge of your seat with this movie. Is that why these people? Why does any serial killer work the way that they do? It's very scary. And then on a more comedic side for me is that there's a lot of similarities for me personally, having seen this movie multiple times, to Halloween 4.
That's funny you mention that, because that's been viral many times. A lot of horror fans talk about Halloween 4 and Signs of the
That's
Lambs,
right.
which has never happened, by the way.
The whole burned face,
or the way they visit the mental institution in the beginning.
That's right.
The creepy dude who runs the mental institution.
Yeah. The creepy dude looks just exactly like Michael Myers in Halloween 4, The Mask. Now,
actually, I think we said that last night.
We did, and he does. I'll put that on Instagram, the page, just a side by side. I think that the Mask from Halloween 4 is based on this guy, and yet this movie was made after Halloween 4. So
this may be the first review ever that's ever actually linked those two movies together. So
I'm gonna do there's a first time for everything. Dive analysis that Dan will love, because he loves this.
So Dan,
movie.
is this your favorite horror movie? We like to bring outsiders.
To be honest, I wouldn't consider this a horror movie.
A thriller, right?
Really?
Yeah.
That's why it's
I know we'll get to our ratings at the end, but to me, it's not horror.
I totally get that too. I feel the same way, partially.
Yeah.
There are some movies that cross two different genres that you're like, is this horror? But then it shows up as horror.
This is a horror.
I'm like, well, there's a horror. Yeah, there's a horror.
Yeah, there's definitely parts. I mean, especially where, we've already talked about the face being cut off and him using that as a, decoy and things like that. But, yeah, the whole concept of the movie, to me, I don't view it as horror. And I've watched some horror movies. We've talked about some of the ones I've watched recently, but,
Do you think Hannibal Lecter's going to, come get you? Like, do you
I think I've figured out that he's not real.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. But
we're here. It's funny. We're actually at a campsite, maybe a little off season, but I'm thinking like it's us, maybe a few other normal people, and definitely some fucking weirdos. We're just trying to survive here.
Maybe we're the weirdos.
Yeah, maybe we are. I mean, we are the one doing a fucking podcast.
I do like that.
We did watch Town Hall 7 this morning while we ate breakfast. So
we made it to the pinnacle today on this hike.
Yeah.
And I was up there just thinking about, man, Buffalo Bill really had some crazy dreams, didn't he? That's what went through my mind as I'm out there at the peak.
Well,
and I was on all fours, just
there's one thing that I think that is really cool about this movie is that you think the relationship between Clarice and Hannibal Lecter is. Oh, you're told that Hannibal Lecter's a bad guy. You're told that he's a serial killer and a cannibal, but the relationship between he and Clarice becomes a main point of the movie. Obviously, to the point where you think, well, he's not that bad of a guy. For a moment, you think for a second like, well, they work together. They're working well together.
She treats him like a human being,
yeah,
and not what he is. And right. she makes a point at one part of the movie to say, I can't promise you anything, in terms of convicting him for things, because that is her job at the end of the day. But, she developed a relationship where she made him feel like a human being and didn't, really entirely judge him for what he was. So,
right. But I like that because you forget. It's almost like it puts that out of the viewer's mind, right? It takes it out of your mind and think, okay, yeah, he's a bad guy, but he's not going to do anything bad in this movie.
Well, actually, the owner or the fucking guy who ran that mental institution was the exact opposite.
He
and
was the
really
bad
late,
guy.
but he got fucking filleted.
At
Wasn't
the
he the dude who
end-
got his face? Like, who got their face taken? No, it was a security
Nah, it's
guard.
one of the
No.
two guards.
But he got killed too. Right?
No, well, it's presumed he's after him now at the end. At the very end, he's
Okay.
he's
Oh,
like,
that's
I'm
right.
catching
That's
up with an
right,
old
yeah.
friend.
At the,
right?
I'm gonna have an old friend for dinner, which was a great line.
Yeah, that
but
is a great
before
line.
that, at the hotel, to your point, he was the exact opposite character.
Yeah, they do a good job in some way of making you, I don't know, rational, and maybe not rationalize, but
It's
almost,
the great. We were briefly off. We were just talking about gray areas. I'm like, yeah, you forget. It's like The Sopranos were really good at that. Like, you start to feel for Tony, but I'm like, oh, these guys are fucking assholes.
Yeah, they're all
But they're
bad
not
people.
good.
Right.
Yeah, but the psychological thing where they can entice you and make you
Well,
fucking
and that's
think
what
a
I
certain
like,
way.
right? So, like, 3/4 of the way through the movie is that you think, all right, well, I'm going to put that thought aside that Hannibal's going to do anything bad in this movie. Well, Hannibal gets his, you see truly Hannibal and who for what he is when he gets the 2 security guards, right? He found no value in those 2 people. And he took every opportunity to get out and escape and get back to what he was doing. And I don't know, for a moment, like that brings you back, right? You forget about that because you're worried about Clarice catching Buffalo Bill.
But I almost think that like he was in such an extreme scenario that everything he's done in the past is ghastly. But what he did in that scenario, I think it was maybe a bit extreme. He could have just got out, and I guess he took it to the next step. To your point, but
Yeah, he's
he
crafty.
also he needed to do what he needed to do to get out. I guess he just didn't have to go to those lengths, which is
Well, and then he's doing something violent and vile. He bites the guy's mouth. He starts to slap the other guy with, I guess, the nightclub. Mm-hmm. But
methodically.
they never visually
in the elevator scene.
they never visually show you that
No.
the
Right.
victim, and so you have to just visualize in your mind, and that's what I think, in my opinion, a good horror movie does is that it doesn't have to show it to you. It has to insinuate, and then you make up your own interpretation of what that is. That's
It's the
happening.
mystery. That's all.
Part of the writing that was so good is when he's doing that scene beating, with the club, and you don't actually see the beating, but he's doing it with such like almost grace, and there's like classical music
Yeah.
happening in the background, and it
Unsettling.
it again just draws an element of mystery to his character, and you think about how brilliant of a person he actually is, aside from as sick and twisted as he is,
Yeah.
and the things he partakes in. So
That's his
they did
flaw.
they did a good job, really, kind of like towing that line between those two things.
Yeah. So,
Well, I think it's a tough movie to break down and analyze piece by piece because I think it's just such a magnificent movie. But Dan, you've never been on this podcast. There are 4 criteria.
it's a very
to-
complex rated scale.
very
here.
complex. It's taken almost 2 seasons.
I still don't
Probably-
even know it. I get it wrong almost every other episode.
Connor's literally never said it right in an episode.
I don't think
I'm
so.
loosely familiar.
I know the end.
So we're gonna go from the bottom to the top, and I'll explain it to you. And Connor, I'm gonna just ask you
Sure,
to
yeah.
shut your mouth
Okay.
because you have no idea what you're talking about. with this
So
movie.
I'll pour a little more Chianti.
I'll take some Chianti
Yeah,
too.
give me some
we go.
Chianti as we go through it.
Get the
So
fava beans
Dan,
going. Yeah.
Dan, the bottom of the
Blood
barrel
red.
is spookless, right? Spookless. This isn't a spookless movie. I'm gonna just be honest with you.
Okay.
Right. It's a bottom of the barrel shitty movie. It's very few scares, no anxiety driven scenes, and then there's not too spooky, which is it's getting better. It's getting better. Let's give it a 26 out of 50 on a test, on a blue book test, right?
That's
and
a failure, but sure,
It's
yeah.
a failure, but it's
It's about where we are now.
it's getting
Yep.
there, right? And then you get to a spooky movie, which is we're gonna give it a 50 to 75. It's trending in the right direction. And then you have Way Too Spooky, which is just cream of the crop. It's the if you were Buffalo Bill, and you found your victim, she's your Way Too Spooky.
And here's the thing, because I know you're
It's a
very
size 14.
You're analytical.
It's the size I
Way
was looking
too
for.
spooky doesn't even in this scenario here doesn't mean it actually scared you, but it was so well done
Gotcha.
and it was so good, and you could see why it would freak other people out, especially if this movie was made in 1991. You get it.
Mm-hmm.
That could actually still qualify as way too spooky.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be like it scared you personally.
So what would you? We're gonna give you the guest of the best podcast ever.
First dibs.
First dibs.
First dibs.
What do you think?
Can you give like half scores? No, you got.
we don't allow
No,
that.
That's
no,
why we
I-
have a garbage.
So, like, I'm a teacher, gym teacher. I play by the rules. So, I just want to make sure I'm not going half score here.
Yeah, you don't want to. Don't double cross us. We might have to use you as a.
It's hard. It's hard. It's hard for me to give a rating because I'm so analytical. So it's hard for me to like think about. Am I rating this based on whether it's scary, basically, or am I rating this based on like the quality of what I think the movie is? So and I feel differently about both of those aspects. So to wrap them into one score is a challenge for me. I mean, I think I would rate it way too spooky on the quality of the film. The
If
story.
you said it's a thriller and a mind bender, yes.
Yeah,
Exactly, yeah.
I agree with
yeah.
that.
I get it.
I don't believe it's scary. There's some scenes that are maybe a little creepy, but it definitely doesn't like. I'm not really on the edge of my seat as I watch this movie. It's more of like an interesting, dive into like what's happening, and it's thriller too. So yeah, I mean, I would rate it at the top of the scale.
Way too spooky.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna have to agree with our guest here. I think it was just such an iconic movie,
Yeah.
and it hit every other mark. It didn't personally scare me, but I could see why the other people. It Silence of the Lambs just kind of has to be way too spooky.
It's a very well thought after movie. It's a perfectly directed where I mentioned this before in the podcast. It keeps a lot open to the viewer, and it does a job of hitting all the check boxes without giving them to you. You have to achieve them yourself by watching it, and it's like it's real, it's terrible, in the nicest way possible. It's if any of this were to happen to you, if you were to be picked
Get to
out,
the fucking score. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm on the edge of my seat.
It's
a little
way
more
too
so.
spooky.
Way too spooky.
it's
Well-
it's a trifecta.
I would like to know, Connor. You say it's iconic. We were 5 years old when this came out in 1991, and I think we all obviously agree that it's a great movie. But what about it makes you categorize it as iconic?
Well, just hello, Clarice. Just his character.
There's some moments, some
No, his character.
lines.
I mean, just Anthony Hopkins' character of Hannibal is
Yeah.
really just the intense moments, the exchange between him and Jodie Foster. The dialogue was great. The way it was shot was well done, and literally from the first scene to the ending was very intense. So I think this, for me personally, 1991. But like, I watched this years later. It was the first movie I remember watching, just being really into. Like,
Okay.
as far as a story, and not just the garbage horror aspect or bullshit effect or
I like
anything.
the fact too that they didn't have to
Made me
have-
think.
They don't have the technology that we have today. I think they would find Buffalo Bill like immediately.
You're not gonna find a well-written movie like this.
I think that's what makes us appreciate some of this stuff. I mean, even watching older movies that are not even in the horror genre with my kids, it's like times were so simple back then.
It's funny, and like we're in our late 30s, we're now becoming those guys.
Yeah.
Man, when I was a kid,
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is the way it was. And so, but I'm like, I think we've actually hit the point of society between TikTok videos and all this bullshit. I'm like, no, this actually was really the best.
It was.
This stuff was well written, is my point.
Yeah.
It was a well thought out movie.
Yeah, well, this is a whole different track we could go down as to why that's all the case now. But yeah.
Well, being the fact that you have watched the entire series, eventually we'd like to have you back for a follow-up.
That'd be great.
I've never seen any with the prequel or anything that Red Dragon. I never really watched in full. I never really watched anything, but I'm like, I think I kind of have to like watch them now. So
Oh yeah,
you've seen them all.
I will definitely need to revisit. It's been quite a while.
Oh,
Since I've
we
seen
always revisit. But like, if we'll do another one in this franchise, but we're gonna have to have you come back on because I remember you surprised us like a few years ago. You just randomly got into this whole series.
Well,
was
we're
like,
also
yeah,
going
I
to
should
have you
probably
back
watch it again.
if we were to ever launch a comedic or comedy podcast of some sort. We'll have you back on for Blue Streak.
That's definitely Blue Streak. The comedy is definitely
Chris
my cup of tea.
hates Blue Streak with a passion.
It's an amazing
and
movie.
you're not a fan of Martin Lawrence for his acting abilities for some strange reason.
It's just too much. We'll get into it. with another
Ah,
episode.
I'm excited for that one.
We should just start like a Blue Streak podcast where we just talk about that movie over and over and over and over and over again.
It's just it just dumbs everybody else down. We're like, why would you get rid of the guns that you just purchased?
It's comedy at its
Why
best.
is that okay? That's
I
not
think we should
okay.
actually watch Blue Streak tonight.
We have a long list of movies we want to watch tonight.
Anyways, this was
All
the
right.
Blue Streak
Hey,
podcast.
I gotta say, this is a rarity. It doesn't always happen, but we got a way too spooky across the board.
Yeah. From a guy who I have to appreciate that you be on this podcast in all because you're
he doesn't have a choice because we're deep in the woods.
It was fun. It was it's not something that I'm usually involved in, but I enjoyed it and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Cool. All right. That's a wrap. We'll see you guys soon.
Goodbye, Clarice.